The Peabody Cinema Club. They set out to make movies. Instead, they made time capsules. Welcome to the Roaring '20s, Peabody style. In the '20s, at George Peabody College for Teachers, the films were silent and the cloche hat was the cat's meow. In the '20s, at Peabody College, the leather football helmet was still in vogue. And over there in that big brick building, the so-called Peabody Demonstration School, they were teaching little kids how to handle tools. The Peabody College of the '20s was the creation of its president, a benevolent despot by the name of Bruce Ryburn Payne. Historian Paul Conkin.
It was his campus, and everyone knew that.
Payne had a different way of doing things. Unlike most elite schools, at Bruce Payne's Peabody, the bar was set low.
You've heard a great deal about standards, which are to keep the majority out of school. I am begging you today to discover new modes of teaching and standards that will keep them in school. Bruce Payne.
The focus at Peabody was not grades, but service, making a difference in the world. Bruce Payne's Peabody was
less elite, more informal, friendly, open.
When Bruce Payne took over at Peabody in 1911, the school was well over 100 years old. Payne built on that past, and by the time he was done, the seeds were sown for Vanderbilt University's Peabody College, a nationally recognized college that's a worldwide leader in the fields of education and human development. This is the story of how that happened, a story of triumphs and struggles, of dreamers and dream makers. This rock foundation is all that's left of the meeting house that once was home to Davidson Academy, the forerunner of today's Peabody College. The school opened in 1785. Its only teacher, a switch-toting parson by the name of Thomas Craighead. He's buried nearby.
The likely students came from the better, well-established families, but not all of them, I'm sure.
In 1808, the school would relocate to downtown Nashville, population 4,000. By this time, the school's name had been changed to Cumberland College. It would be the first of many name changes.
Lindsley is the most distinguished person in the history of Peabody.
In 1824, Philip Lindsley turned down the presidency of Princeton University and moved south, where he took over at Cumberland College.
His lectures were superb. He was honored, invited everywhere to give public speeches at ceremonies and occasions.
For his inaugural address, Lindsley prepared a 3-hour speech which he offered to deliver in Latin. The trustees politely declined.
Learning cannot be inherited like money and lands. The same tedious, painful process must be repeated with every new generation. Philip Lindsley.
While there were only 28 students when Lindsley took over in 1824, the new president saw potential. He dreamt of a university that would be the Princeton of what was then America's western frontier, a university that would educate teachers.
No animal is by nature so destitute and helpless as man. He is emphatically the creature of education.
2 years after Lindsley's arrival, the school changed names again. Cumberland College would become the University of Nashville, a name that would stick for a while. Meanwhile, Lindsley lectured on.
At 3 o'clock, went into Dr. Lindsley's lecture and listened to him an hour on the scriptures. It was quite interesting and instructive. Jethro Peyton Gatlin.
Student Jethro Gatlin kept a diary during his time at the University of Nashville. Jethro was a bit of a goody two-shoes, but he got out often enough to lodge an age-old complaint.
Tonight at a party till 12 o'clock, my enjoyment was not great. The ladies were too few and the gentlemen too numerous.
By the 1840s, the University of Nashville had become a center of higher education in the South. Unlike many of his classmates, Jethro took full advantage.
This being the day before Christmas, a number of the students were so taken with the idea of enjoying the festivities of the season that they did not make an appearance in the recitation room. Tomorrow is Christmas. I will do whatever I can in the way of study.
Philip Lindsley would resign the presidency of the University of Nashville in 1850. By that time, more than 1,000 students had enrolled at the school and more than 400 had earned degrees. Lindsley, who is credited with first calling Nashville the Athens of the South, had set the tone for a city that to this day takes its education very, very seriously. When the Civil War began in 1861, most University of Nashville students joined the Confederate Army. A year later, Union forces occupied the city without bloodshed, some camping on the grounds of the state capitol. When the Civil War ended on April 9, 1865, the South was in disarray. Any hope of a timely reconciliation of North and South was lost a week later when Abraham Lincoln was assassinated. Enter American philanthropist George W. Peabody.
He was the first philanthropist. He gave all his money away to benefit humankind.
The Massachusetts-born George Peabody was an American expatriate living in London. He made his money in textiles and investment banking and began giving it away in the 1850s.
It is the duty and privilege of the more favored and wealthy portions of our nation to assist those who are less fortunate. George W. Peabody.
Peabody financed public housing in England and libraries and museums in the United States, but his greatest contribution would be to the Peabody Education Fund.
His was a vision for a reviving South, and education being the center of that.
The board of the Peabody Education Fund would include a who's who of American leaders. The world's most exclusive men's club, one historian called it.
It always had, as one of its members, the President of the United States.
In 1867, Peabody sent this letter to the board.
I give you, gentlemen, the sum of $1 million for the promotion and encouragement of intellectual, moral, or industrial education among the young of the more destitute portions of the southern and southeastern states of our Union.
During the decade that followed, the Peabody Board spent most of its time and money on organizing public school systems throughout the South. After that, the board turned its attention to establishing a so-called normal school.
A normal school is different than a university. It really it's a 2-year program to training teachers.
The Peabody Normal College, a part of the University of Nashville, opened in this building on December 1st, 1875, with 3 teachers and 13 students, all women. The school's motto? A quote from benefactor George Peabody.
Education, a debt due from present to future generations.
A century after its founding, the University of Nashville and its in-house subsidiary, the Peabody Normal College, were still going strong. By now, the university boasted 600 students and had a culture and traditions all its own. But change was in the air. In 1905, the Peabody Education Fund would approve $1 million to replace the 2-year normal school with a full-blown teachers' college.
George Peabody College was to be not only a good undergraduate college, but to be a major graduate institution for teachers.
A struggle over where to locate the school soon began, and it would be almost 10 years before the new George Peabody College for Teachers would open. More on that later. Meanwhile, back on campus, life went on, as was so charmingly documented by a young photographer named Minnie Elvie Sutcliff.
These pictures were taken on the coldest day of winter, 1909.
17-year-old Minnie Elvie Sutcliff from West Monroe, Louisiana, came to Peabody to earn a certificate that would qualify her to teach in public schools back home. Beginning in 1907, Elvie kept a photo scrapbook, complete with inscriptions.
Roommates. A chain is no stronger than its weakest link.
College, for Elvie, like most students, was all about making friends. chief among them roommate Bessie Johnston.
My roommate. Her face is always wreathed in smiles.
It wasn't exactly a uniform, but here's what the well-dressed Peabody co-ed wore at the turn of the century.
The Big Four.
Take the basic look, add jackets and hats, and you've got
Ruth, Bessie, and Elvie, ready for the matinee. Studying.
anything having to do with actual schoolwork seldom appeared in Elvie's scrapbook, but there were rare exceptions.
Lindsley Hall contains the laboratories, the library, and the sorority rooms. Dr. Hill, our psychology teacher, and dog.
During the time Elvie and her friends were in school, this man, Peabody President James Porter, was busy raising hundreds of thousands of dollars to fund the new teachers' college. The former Tennessee governor was able to raise money based on his promises that the college would stay put downtown, but it was not to be.
Behind his back, a group of conspirators were working hard to move it.
Vanderbilt Chancellor James Kirkland led the contingent of townsfolk pushing to relocate Peabody next door to Vanderbilt. They believed a merger would make both schools stronger. They also hoped to put some distance between Peabody and the red light district that bordered its downtown campus.
It was a battle that engaged half the people in Nashville. It was continuously publicized. People chose sides.
In the end, Vanderbilt's Kirkland won. The campus was moved, but at great cost. Porter resigned as president of Peabody in 1909. As far as Porter and his supporters were concerned, Vanderbilt was trying to steal Peabody's $1 million endowment. Was Porter right to feel betrayed?
He was betrayed. But he was wrong in his estimate of what would be good for the future of Peabody.
In June of 1911, Peabody Normal College shut down operations to prepare for the move from downtown to its new campus across the street from Vanderbilt. 2 months later, a new president took over. Bruce Payne's great Peabody adventure was about to begin. He was 37 years old.
I wish to assure you that we shall respect, honor, and continue the traditions and ideals of this institution. Peabody is not dead, and by the help of God, it is not going to die. Bruce Payne.
It was a dream come true. Over the next 3.5 years, Bruce Payne would preside over the creation of a college pretty much out of thin air. He would be responsible for creating a new curriculum, hiring a new faculty, and designing a new campus, all from scratch. Not a problem.
In that day and time, he was what you'd call a micromanager, and he kept his finger on everything.
This is the heart of the Peabody campus. Made to Bruce Payne's specifications, in time this Peabody landscape came to be known as the Pillars of Peabody. It was even celebrated in song, as Bruce Payne's grandson fondly recalls.
Here where the pillars of Peabody rise in their delicate grace, why should I ever, who love them so, belong to an alien place?
When George Peabody College for Teachers opened its doors in the summer of 1914, only the home economics and industrial arts buildings were complete. Add the on-campus mini-farm, and you had what at first glance appeared to be a vocational school. For those who worried that the new curriculum sounded too much like a trade school, Peabody explained it was not teaching students how to raise chickens. It was teaching students how to teach other people how to raise chickens. At the time, this was better than a good idea. It was an idea that this man, John D. Rockefeller, was willing to pay for. And beginning in 1910, Rockefeller's General Education Board would become Peabody's primary benefactor. Join the club.
Vanderbilt got more money from Rockefeller than they ever got from the Vanderbilts.
Bruce Payne would preside over the new Peabody with a deft hand. He took naturally to this hybrid, half-college, half-trade school. Who was Bruce Payne? A professional educator, of course, with a Ph.D. from Columbia University's Teachers College, a sometime poet, a loving grandfather.
Doc? Oh, I was crazy about him. Those days, you got long pants when you got to be about 13. And before that, you wore knickers.
Carr Payne is the boy not in knickers. He's joined by his brother, father, and grandfather, who he called Doc.
Doc was a workaholic. He worked all the time.
Payne was a hands-on president. He and his wife actually lived on campus in an apartment here atop what was then called the Social Religious Building.
At night, when the weather was good, they would sit out there, and anybody that wanted to come by and visit with the president was welcome.
The summer school exemplified the Peabody of Payne. A smorgasbord of courses, everything from farming to philosophy, were taught by a distinguished local and visiting faculty. But it was not all work and no play. There were dances, recitals, and off-campus excursions. In the late 20s, kids from the Peabody Cinema Club began documenting campus life using the latest high-tech gadget, the motion picture camera. When done with the melodramas, the filmmakers turned the camera on what was going on around them. They shot football games, favorite teachers, and children at play at the Peabody Demonstration School. The Demonstration School was a laboratory that showcased some of the latest advances in K-12 education. By the late 20s, the teaching of vocational schools had spread to the lower grades. 8-year-old boys sporting ties were learning how to use hammers and drills and saws. And what were the girls up to while all this building was going on? The Peabody Cinema Club would last only 2 years. So this is the last we'll ever see of Maria, the dope fiend maid.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen.
In 1930, Peabody launched a radio program they called the Teachers College of the Air.
These programs in themselves are intended as salutes to American childhood and its place in the affairs of the nation.
The Teachers College of the Air would run for 15 years on WSM radio. Highlights of the 30s were a visit from President Franklin Roosevelt and the graduation of playwright William Inge, who would go on to write the Pulitzer Prize-winning drama Picnic and the Oscar-winning screenplay for Splendor in the Grass. Peabody President Bruce Ryburn Payne died suddenly on April 21, 1937. The cause, a heart attack. He was 63 years old.
He was the most important formative figure in George Peabody College for Teachers.
Before his death, Payne wrote a poem that seems a fitting eulogy for the college president and the man.
This beautiful world. The dreams I dream may never come true, yet I've lived in a beautiful world. For the glory of God has shone through and through as I traveled this beautiful world. Though the light go out, the dark will not come to me in this beautiful world. I shall close my eyes when the day is done with the calm of this beautiful world.
Army air training here practically dominated the campus for 2.5 years.
During World War II, the Army Air Corps took over about half the Peabody campus to train pilots. Both the Army and Peabody continued hallowed traditions, the Army staging parades, Peabody staging dances. Post-war scholarship winners included one of Peabody's most famous alumni, a very young and very photogenic Betty Page. Why is Betty famous? Let's just say Betty was sultry when sultry wasn't cool.
The glory period for George Peabody College, I think, was the early 50s when I was here on campus.
When World War II ended, the GI Bill flooded campuses nationwide with veterans. And for a time, men actually outnumbered women on the Peabody campus. The college built a special Veterans Village to house the ex-soldiers and their families.
Now, mister, tell us who you be. My name is William Walker. I'm a singing school teacher.
The Peabody Summer School continued to flourish in the 50s.
It had up to 5,000 students here in the summer.
Now strike as you may. I had the first blow, but I'll sing you down.
What was the attraction? Locally produced operas like Singing Billy, field trips, and the legendary Sunday evening Vespers service. While Nashville's lunch counter sit-ins made national headlines in 1960, the Peabody campus remained calm. The school had quietly integrated 6 years earlier, first admitting 14 black graduate students in the summer of 1954.
We've had many influential women coming out of Peabody, and perhaps the one that probably stands out in my memories is Susan Gray.
In 1962, a group led by Sergeant Shriver, a brother-in-law of President John F. Kennedy, visited Susan Gray's experimental preschool at Peabody.
But when they saw what this preschool was doing, our experimental preschool was doing, Sergeant Shriver said, "We need to do this on a national scale." And that was the spark for Head Start.
By the time the Vietnam War heated up, most of Peabody's students again were women, so the war had little direct impact. In 1972, in what would turn out to be a historic move, Peabody began admitting scholarship athletes from Vanderbilt University.
Peabody became the home of most of the football players, partly because everyone perceived the standards as being lower.
Official word came on March 26, 1979. Peabody College was to merge with Vanderbilt. While Peabody President John Dunworth shouldered the blame, the merger had been a long time coming. Sharon Shields was on the Peabody faculty.
Of course there was anger. You know, this had been our sacred place. This was Peabody College.
After years of losing money, Peabody started secret merger negotiations with Vanderbilt. When that fell through, Peabody turned to Tennessee State University, the traditionally black school on the other side of town.
We woke up one morning and in the headlines of the Tennessean, we were merging with Tennessee State University.
Meaningful talk of a Tennessee State-Peabody merger would come to a halt on Valentine's Day, 1979. Bottom line, if the merger with Tennessee State took place, Vanderbilt stood to lose dozens of scholarship athletes from its football and basketball teams.
I think at the level of the Board of Trust and many outsiders, the athletic problem was uppermost in their mind.
The arranged marriage of Peabody and Vanderbilt was soon complete. The independent George Peabody College for Teachers, that could trace its history back almost 2 centuries, was no more. Sharon Shields organized a faculty-student protest.
We dressed in our academic regalia. We marched from the Common Center across the mall to in front of the administration building.
It was really about give us voice, let us help frame this, let us help move this.
40-some people lost their job. I think the success, though, of Peabody as part of Vanderbilt has confirmed the rationale for the merger. It didn't hurt Peabody, the merger saved Peabody.
For all of the fear and all of the grief, it has been a transformational merger.
But it would take a while. Following the merger, Peabody was still stuck with the same old problem: how to raise enough tuition money to keep the doors open. Not to worry. The inscription had been there on the Wyatt Building all the time. To the glory of God and the service of mankind, it said. Words that modern Peabody administrators took to heart.
That's just part of our curriculum. We build that into the curriculum, that sense of social responsibility.
In the early 80s, Peabody created a new undergraduate major known as Human and Organizational Development.
The language for success is, what do you predict?
In HOD, future leaders are taught how to get the most out of people and organizations in the service of community.
So for the first half of the term, we learned about the different problems that exist in our communities. And the second half of the term, we start talking about the solutions that existed to those problems.
Semester-long internships expose students to not only careers, but careers with a conscience.
Like when we're in the mall and you're like shopping for all these clothes, I have a tendency to think like, do I really need another pair of jeans when there's someone out there who doesn't even know where the next meal is going to come from?
Today, HOD is the most popular undergraduate major not only at Peabody, but in all of Vanderbilt University. Peabody is not just for teachers anymore.
I think it's about being able to say, you know, I'm going to do something positive with my life. I'm going to be able to go make a change in a community.
Some people are just built to serve, and I just think I'm one of those people.
Cassie Suzanne Lynn, Christopher Daniel Lyon, Laura Ann McNaughton.
Education. It mattered then, it matters now, and it will matter in the future. George Peabody had it right.
Education, a debt due from present to future generations.
It's a debt that keeps coming due. A debt Peabody graduates will be paying for years to come.
The lessons that I learned here, I'll take with me for a lifetime.
And I've learned selflessness here, which I'm so grateful for.
50 years from now, I want people to go back and say, it was Peabody and Vanderbilt that created the change that made education a much more effective enterprise than it is today.